Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the summit of Little Round Top. It's a little after 4:30, and we'll hang out here for just a minute, waiting on a couple more folks to chime in. For those who are watching us from across the globe, my name is Jason Martz, and I am the communications specialist for Gettysburg National Military Park and Eisenhower National Historic Site. And we're going to take a hike around much of Little Round Top here this afternoon. And we're going to take questions. I have the assistance of my intern. Her name is Katie, and she will be manning a separate tablet to take questions. We'll try to answer those as we go along. We will probably need to stop every once in a while to take a water break. So during those breaks, we'll probably also consolidate some questions and try to answer as many of those as possible. Now, I know that a lot of folks have asked two common questions, and I'd like to take a minute to answer both of those right away. This way, those of you who are online right now can probably help chime in when folks join in later, and help us answer some of these questions. First and foremost, we'll take the easy one first. When will Little Round Top reopen? Little Round Top will reopen sometime in the year 2024. We're basing that off of the contracts that we have on this project. There are two contracts, in fact. One is a construction contract. We'll start with that one. And that runs for 18 months. Now, the project got started near the end of July 2022, and 18 months, roll that date forward, is late January 2024. Right, 2024. And that's when the construction is slated to be done. Now, that does not mean, however, that the hill will reopen to the general public, and that falls back to the second contract. Now, the second contract is a revegetation contract. Now, the revegetation contract is going to take potentially a little bit more time. Now, this contract isn't necessarily associated with any date. Mother Nature will ultimately determine when Little Round Top reopens. And for those of you who are familiar, I'll move the camera here. We're looking out across the summit of Little Round Top from the top of the 44th New York Monument. I'll move the camera over here and look downhill towards Devil's Den. Now, that rehabilitation project took place early in 2022, and the top of it, the crown of it, if you will, is still not quite ready for the general public, and that is simply because the native vegetation never had a chance to take hold last year. The contractor who was working with us on that project had done everything that they needed to do, and then Mother Nature stepped in and decided that the heat waves would start and the rain would stop. So the vegetation that was put down on the crown of Devil's Den never got a chance to take. So that's why that area, in fact, is still closed. Devil's Den, by and large, completely open except for that circular area there at the very top, and that's still the case, and that may not reopen until later this fall. Little Round Top may have some kind of similar situation. Now, we're hoping that some of the things that we learned during the Devil's Den rehabilitation project in early 22 will help us determine and get things done as quickly as possible here at Little Round Top. So that's the general idea there. We do know that the construction contract will end at the end of January 2024, so we do know that that work will be done. That does not, however, mean that the hill will reopen. The revegetation contract is more up to Mother Nature, and we will show some of what we mean by the revegetation of Little Round Top. There are places, in fact, where we actually need to go in and have trees planted, bushes planted, native vegetation of multiple kinds to help fill in gaps where major social trails and where major erosion had occurred. And the only way to close up those areas and make them no longer feasible for visitors to use as a shortcut to get from point A to point B, that simply is just going to take some time. And we will talk about that. We will show that as we go across the hill here today. Number two, this is kind of the monkey, the rhinoceros, the elephant in the room. Have we found any artifacts here at Little Round Top? The answer, quite simply, is yes, we have. Let's provide a little background on archaeological work, on the archaeological work here at Little Round Top. Really, any time that the construction contractor has gone into an area of Little Round Top to begin work, they can't touch the ground. They can't put a shovel in the ground. They can't scrape the ground. They can't do anything until our archaeological folks have had a chance to go in ahead of them and basically scan the area, metal detect in the area. And that has been ongoing every day since the project started late last July. So again, the contractor can't move into an area until the archaeologist has given the go-ahead to do so. Now, what have they found? Numbers-wise is approaching 2,000 artifacts. 2,000 artifacts. Most of those, however, fall into two very simple sections. More of the modern stuff, more of a, well, isn't that nice, kind of a throwaway type of item. And then the other stuff is yeah, the real, legitimate, historic stuff that would have been deposited here in one form or another in 1863. Of those categories, what we've found most of are cut nails. Lots and lots and lots of cut nails. And that's not the modern nail, that's more of the early 20th century, late 19th century cut nail, very solid piece of metal used in construction. Lots of those. Coming in at number two are mini balls of all kinds. Dropped mini balls, spent mini balls, all kinds of items like that. Really, at the end of the day, aside from the single piece of unexploded ordnance, very little of what has been found has been out of those two categories, the cut nails and mini balls. There are a few other items, but again, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that is reshaping in a major way the way that we interpret the battle here at Little Round Top. But again, we are approaching 2,000 items, some more modern and some historical, but again, the basis are, and then coming in at number two are mini balls, lots of those as well, both dropped and spent. So those are the ones that are hitting breastworks, hitting some of the boulders, and being mashed up into all different types of forms and shapes and so forth. So Katie, before we leave this the top of the 44th New York, do we have any questions that are coming across that don't fall into those first two categories of when will the hill reopen, and have we found any? Nothing so far. Okay, well, very good. All right, so here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to use the vantage point of the top of the 44th New York monument, and we're going to use this as a means to get a bird's eye view of some of the work that has been done so far. And for those who have been following along, we have an incredible amount of content on our park website, www.nps.gov/GETT, short for Gettysburg. And we have a special page on the Little Round Top Rehabilitation Project. There's a link right there on the home page for it. And you can go there and check out frequently asked questions. And really what comes into play here during this virtual visit is you can see not just what's pictures from recently, but also that the pictures date back to when the project first got started back in the summer of 2022. So you can follow along on the park website and really get yourself up to speed as to what was taking place when, and probably answer the question also why. Now we're also going to be talking quite a bit about the different types of materials that you're seeing out here. There are two major types. One, when you see it, is going to largely be available to those with mobility issues. Those are the areas that are going to be fully accessible, where the accessibility did not exist before. And I'm going to turn the camera straight down, and we're going to look at the base of the 44th New York, and you're going to see what's called an exposed aggregate concrete. Now this exposed aggregate concrete, wherever you see it, not everywhere, but most of the locations, once this project is finished, when you see that material, you know that that is a mobility, it's a location where anybody who has mobility issues will be able to utilize that path to get around Little Round Top in ways that were never really available until now. Now there's a second material, and we'll come around here to the northwest corner, and we'll look out over again, and over here you can see the connection between the exposed aggregate concrete and this brown material. Now this may look like dirt. It's not, and we'll get a closer look at this in a little bit. But this is what's known as stabilized aggregate, and it's two different sizes of stone, one a little larger, one a little smaller. It's mixed on site. The trail is laid out, and then a series of additions are made to those trails with a stabilizing agent. Now the stabilizing agent you can think of, for our purposes here, it's kind of the consistency and look really of what most people would associate with Elmer's glue. And that material is sprayed down, and it is compacted and kind of mixed into the trail. And in many cases, depending on where it is, you could see 3 applications of that stabilizer, 4 applications, 5 applications. It just depends kind of on where it is on the hill. And we're going to see that stabilized aggregate in multiple different phases, from fully complete all the way to it's laid out, but nothing has been added to it. No stabilizing agent has been added to it. It hasn't been compacted yet. But really anywhere where you see that stabilized aggregate, this pebble mixture that kind of looks like dirt, that is in many cases a location that used to be an old social trail that likely was eroded horribly. These are the ones that were causing so many of the issues that really pushed this project to be something that needed to happen in the first place. And we're going to see a lot of those trails all over the hill because what we've done is take a look at how the hill was used and listen to the visitor. How does the visitor use the hill? And how can we then take how the visitor uses the hill and create the best experience for the visitor and for the long-term viability of the hill itself? How do we maintain this hill, which is by far the most visited single location on the battlefield? Approximately 90% of our visitors who come to Gettysburg come to Little Round Top. And decades and decades and decades of that kind of visitation has taken its toll. So this viability that we're talking about is really something that we took very seriously, but we wanted to make the hill as safe as possible. We wanted to add as much accessibility as we possibly could, but also be able to maintain it in such a way that these decisions that were being made would be able to be appreciated and used for generations, hopefully. The last time something like this was done here at Little Round Top goes back to some in the 1970s, some in the 1950s, a little bit here, a little bit there, but this is really the first time in a very, very long time, and really to some degree, maybe ever, that this type of overall look at how the hill is used, how it's visited, and how can we as an agency maintain this space for generations to come. And so we've taken this responsibility very seriously, and even as you're looking around and I'm moving around from one spot to another, you're seeing spaces that look really finished. Like here in the center of this, we have an accessible sidewalk. The grass is growing up nice and green on either side. And then we come down here to kind of, we'll call it an island, in between here on what would be the east side of the monument, and then come around here to the south where again we have largely a finished section. We have these little islands that aren't finished yet. And this is an example of one of them. There's another one around Hazlitt's Battery. We'll show that one in a little while. But these little islands that you're seeing that aren't quite finished yet are simply because we stepped in, took a look at the plans, and realized the plans didn't actually match what needed to be taking place on the ground. And so we worked with the contractor and altered the plans to fit how we believe the visitor will use the space and what is best for the landscape, the cultural and historic landscape of Little Round Top. So you're going to see some of these islands. We'll be pointing some of these out as we go along. But I think at this point, again, I'll turn over to Katie and see if we've got any questions that require answering. And if not, okay, we're going to take a walk. We're going to head out. We're going to go out of the 44th New York, and we're going to head down the hill. We're going to take the direction down this new formalization of an old social trail, and we're going to head over towards the 16th Michigan and down towards Warren Avenue. And that trail has been locally dubbed the Confederate Attack Trail. Again, that's another one that used to be a social trail created by our visitors, but we felt of such importance that it needed to be formalized. And we're going to take a walk, and we're going to go all the way down to Warren Avenue. So give me 1 second to step over Little barricade here, and we'll head downstairs. Okay, we'll circle back to the west side, but we're going to go out the east side, step down, and we're going to turn around real quick and take a look at the base here at the base of the 44th New York, and you can get a chance to see very clearly the accessibility of this exposed aggregate concrete. And one of the little decisions that we made was to take a look at even the smallest little detail. For those who remember, there used to be a little step up to this step right here before you actually went up the stairs and into the base of the 44th. Originally, the plans called for the concrete to be a little lower, a few inches, and we felt that that really wasn't a good idea, that wasn't the best as far as safety was concerned. So we asked the contractor to raise the level of the concrete to make it level with this first step. It's no longer a step, it's more like a landing platform that then goes into the 44th New York. Little decisions like that are commonplace. These are the kinds of things that we have made time and time again. That one is something that's done, but this little island right here in between the south side and the north side of the 44th New York, this is still something that is being worked through contracting, and eventually what we're going to have, and I can provide a little bit of a background, is there are going to be steps going down off the concrete and coming across the side, and we're going to walk this way in just a second, but there's going to be one of the stabilized aggregate trails here along the edge of the walkway. And these walls, both here on the east side and also on the south side, they are going to be faced. So this is unfinished. So we'll keep taking pictures and we'll keep updating our website, but this is an unfinished piece of the puzzle. But getting back to the stairs that come down from the sidewalk around the 44th, they're going to come down and then eventually hook up, and you can see right here there's a stabilized aggregate trail to the right of these orange cones. They're going to move around and start to ultimately angle that trail is going to angle down along Sykes Avenue and will ultimately hook up and be able to get folks down to Chamberlain Avenue and down to the 20th Main. But let's take a walk along this future trail. Forgot this was here. There's the facing material. So the facing material is going to go here along the east side of this retaining wall and around the south side of this retaining wall, and it's also going to be the western face of the bus drop-off area on the east side of the summit. A lot of directions right there. When we walk past that, I'll bring this back up again. But that is the material that has been chosen that will face this wall and also face the bus drop-off retaining wall on the east side of the summit parking area. We'll get a chance to see that as well. These blocks right here are largely going to be retained, and it's just going to be basically a staircase step down, and the trail is going to continue over in this direction. But I want to pause, and I want to bring everyone's attention to this. Now, this is dirt. This is topsoil. This is not the stabilized aggregate, but this is one of the areas, this is probably one of the big prime areas that needs to be revegetated. Okay, this was the site of one of the worst erosion locations that was a social trail. If you can kind of see there through the trees just across Sykes Avenue um, is the location where Chamberlain Avenue abuts Sykes Avenue, goes down through the trees, and winds up at the 20th Main. This was the straight shot that visitors over decades and decades, this was the shortcut that was taken from Chamberlain Avenue straight up, and then ultimately straight up here to the 44th New York. So this is probably the biggest example of revegetation that still needs to take place, and why the hill may not open at the end of January 2024. Again, this is all up to Mother Nature. Once everything has been planted, it's really up to her as to when the hill is going to reopen. But let's swing over here, and this area is largely finished. It's pretty solid. And what we've also been able to create is in multiple locations, actually, and this is just the first of 3 or 4, I think. These gathering spaces are brand new. This was something that, working with our friends and colleagues with the Licensed Battlefield Guides, they needed these spaces. These large bus groups that they bring up here all throughout the year, they need a place to bring those large groups. And we listened, we heard them, and we've taken in many cases, again, like 4, 5, even 6 of these, I can't remember the exact number, but these gathering areas will be fantastic locations where large groups, bus groups of all types, school kids, you name it, will be able to come gather, but not have to worry about the erosion, the serious erosion issues. But this is one of those new gathering areas. Again, this is the stabilized aggregate. It is largely finished. It's a solid material. And we do anticipate, though, that stabilizing agent will likely need to be reapplied every few years. But that's something that we are ready to take on. One of the other items that you're going to notice as we go down through these stabilized aggregate trails, again, these were once social trails that have been formalized, are water bars. Now, these water bars are either large stone boulders, large sections of stone, or they are recycled curbing, granite curbing, that was used at the edges of the Summit parking lot. So we've been able to recycle quite a bit of that. So you'll see a combination of recycled granite curbing being used as these water bars and some of these larger stones. Now this area right through here along the south side of the 44th New York Monument has seen some pretty heavy rain, and the water bars are doing their job masterfully so far. And not only that, but the consistency of the stabilized aggregate has also responded admirably, because the water is meant to come off at an angle about 120 degrees, give or take. Water comes down, hits that water bar, and gets kicked out into an area where it can be properly mitigated. But it never really has a chance to get the same kind of momentum that it used to when what used to be a big ditch, a big channel, and the water would just run right down through, top to bottom, down through this area. And this used to be another one of those really bad rut areas. But since these water bars have been installed, in addition to the stabilized aggregate, the water runoff has been up to this point completely mitigated. You would expect heavy rain to come down through here and begin to wash out over here on the edges. And that has not happened. And again, we've had some pretty heavy rain since this section of trail has been finished over the past couple weeks. And this is also, let me also describe that this is also without one of the mitigating factors that hasn't been installed yet. It's a jute jute coconut mat that is going to lay down here along the edges. It will ultimately disintegrate as the grasses and native plants come up through, but giving this area an opportunity to settle in, if you will. And once everything settles in, we expect that this area at each of these water bars where we've been able to mitigate the water runoff, even without the jute coconut matting, is even going to get better. So again, we have lots of items that have been implemented already and some that haven't been implemented just yet. All right, so we're going to head out on this new trail. Again, this is one of the social trails that we formalized. Now this isn't done yet. This has the stabilized aggregate material, the aggregate I should say, material laid down, but none of the stabilizing material has been placed here yet. Contractor still needs to get in and out of this area, so until they're done out here at the edge of this space, none of the stabilizing material will be put down just yet. They kind of have to work backwards. They go in as deep as they can, do the work, and then work out from the deepest point. So here's one other location that is going to be a revegetation area. This used to be a social trail that used to be a connection between the 16th Michigan, which is the monument there in the box. But this is one of the areas that's going to be revegetated. It's already been given a layer of new topsoil. Here's another one. Again, another straight line that went largely straight up towards the base of the 44th. That's another layer of topsoil. And we get here to this big island of granite, this rock here. Didn't do a thing here, but we did decide to implement a small gathering area here on this side, the east side, the uphill side of the 16th Michigan. Now, once all of the safety materials have been taken off, you'll see why, but this is the main side that has a lot of text on it. Visitors like to come to this side and read what was going on to the 16th Michigan. So this made for a pretty obvious location where we needed to have a small gathering area. And then just above it, water bar. And again, another social trail that has received new topsoil but will get revegetation. So that's what's going on here. Another kind of look back from the shadow of the 16th Michigan. This big flat area of stone, and then up towards the stabilized aggregate that isn't quite finished yet. I think we've got some questions.
Mention again that that's the only path and not that all of these, all of the food.
Yeah, so we're talking about a question here that is, how do we get visitors to use these specific trails? Well, to be honest, we're still hoping. Some of these elements, we think we know which direction to go as far as which trails need to be placed where and in what direction, but we believe that we've got most of these really in the right directions. And again, there have been many cases since this project got started last summer where park staff have come up here with the contractor and spent literally hours talking about a few square yards. A few square yards that the trail should go on this side of the boulder. No, no, the plans say it should go on that side. No, no, we think we know our park, we know our battlefield, we know our hill, we know our visitors. They're going to want to go on this side of the boulder. Back and forth, and finally we come to a consensus, and we're hoping that through a lot of talking things out among staff members and among the contractor and among the architects and designers, we're all on the same page. And ultimately, these ideas, hopefully we get more of them right than we get wrong. But that's okay. If we get some wrong, we're completely willing and able to be flexible and see how things go. Will this project completely solve all of the issues, all of the erosion issues that had been taking place before this project got started? We hope so. But will it? I think realistically, I think we just have to wait until the hill reopens for the visitors to get a chance to see it and move around the space themselves. And hopefully we've addressed more problems. And hopefully most of this has been dealt with. But again, we don't claim to think that we will be able to answer everything at this first go around. It's very possible that we need to come back and do this again. But hopefully we won't have to close the whole hill. It would just be maybe a trail here or there, just to give park staff an opportunity to come in and rework something, a little tweak here and there, but that would hopefully be about it. Okay? All right, so we're coming down off of this big rock ledge down onto this trail, again, that we've dubbed the Confederate Attack Trail. And you can see, in this case, this aggregate is not stabilized yet, and you can see the drastic difference between something that has been stabilized and something that has not been stabilized. The stabilized aggregate, as we saw a few minutes ago on the south side of the 44th New York monument, that's rock solid. Without the stabilizer, you can see what it looks like. This looks very similar, maybe in its infancy, but you can see how the erosion of Little Round Top can affect even the best laid plans. So contractor will need to come back out here and add a little bit more aggregate, and once this area is ready and smoothed over and ready to have the stabilizer applied to it, we fully expect that this section of trail will look just like the section of trail that we talked about a few minutes ago on the south side of the 44th New York. Now this, again, no stabilizing agent has been placed here yet, so this trail is still quite soft. But even as we go down, and we'll swing back up here just for a quick second, that you can see that the only area is up here that has had any kind of issue with water runoff. And my initial thought is, my guess as to why that's the case, because of the momentum that the water would have been able to carry off of that rock ledge. There's nothing in its way. It would have caught a lot of speed coming down off the hill, and by the time it collected into a single location, a lot of erosion happened. But once it got to the water bar, it stopped. So, you know, this even something as small as this, we can take away as a idea, a learning opportunity to make sure that each individual decision that we make on every square yard of this project is done to the best that we can. Katie, any questions as we're walking down here?
Controlling underbrush between the summit and Crawford.
Say that again?
Controlling underbrush between the summit and Crawford.
Ah, underbrush. This. Okay, so at the end of the day, Mother Nature wins. Mother Nature wins every time. Nature wants to do its thing, plants want to grow, and without visitors to kind of, in some cases, help us trample down some of this stuff, this is what happens. We've noticed incredibly high growth rates of the vegetation up here on Little Round Top, as well as lots of wildlife up here on Little Round Top. It's amazing what happens when 90% of the visitors aren't allowed to come up here anymore for a certain amount of time. But we fully anticipate doing more prescribed fires here at Little Round Top, being one of those locations. And that's really the only way that we've found so far that really works in a space that is as geographically difficult to maintain as the west slope of Little Round Top is. So I think that's the answer. Hopefully that answered your question. Let's look back up the hill here. I'd like everyone to take special close attention to the color of the topsoil on the edges and the color of the aggregate in the middle. We think we did a lot of justice to the native soil of Little Round Top, in that once all of the growth comes back along the shoulders of these new made permanent trails, that everything about this aggregate and the color of the aggregate really is going to blend in with the landscape in a way that has never been in the past. So we're really excited, quite frankly, about how this material looks and how closely it resembles just plain old dirt. The soil of Little Round Top. So that we think this is a big win for Little Round Top as far as a cultural landscape location. Sorry, Katie, do we have more questions?
Interpretive signage on new formalized trails.
Interpretive signage. 8 of interpretive panels, waysides, you name it. When we get up to the summit again, and we get to the one really big gathering area off the northwest corner of the parking lot there at the summit, we'll talk about the new panels that will welcome visitors in a way that will allow visitors, whether they are first-time visitors or been here lots and lots of times, a better way to understand Little Round Top, the story of Little Round Top. And yeah, to give you a short answer, yes, there's a ton of additional signage, interpretive panels, welcoming signs, you name it. Will there be one here? Yeah, in fact, we were just talking about this last week. The staff do come to Little Round Top. Usually, many of us come here multiple times a week for different reasons, but we do have one standing schedule once a week, and that's on Thursdays. And we were just talking about where the interpretive signage will, and we're thinking probably right in this neighborhood, kind of right off of the bowl. Pretty excited about the way that the progress of this project has gone. How nicely everything has blended with the cultural natural landscape. the history of the hill, what happened here. Not only that, but also the history of the battlefield. Never mind the battle. But yeah, it is something that we're pretty excited about. Katie, we got another question? Lost audio. Are we okay with audio, folks? Buffering. Okay, we're down in a, well, let's get out of here as quick as we can. We're down in a low spot. If you can't hear us, we're back up. Fantastic, okay. Yeah, if anyone's ever tried to do, sometimes technology gets the better of us, and if we're down in a low spot, there's really nothing we can do. So we're getting out of that spot as quick as we can. I'm going to take a break from talking for a little bit. It's pretty humid here in Gettysburg today, and over the course of the anniversary of the 160th of the battle. I'm going to take a break from talking as we're walking up this incline. Hope you don't mind. Got to take a pause here just for a second. We're going to unlock one of the gates so that we can get through. Hang tight for just a second here, folks. Yeah, the weather today, yesterday, tomorrow, very reminiscent of the actual weather conditions during the time of the battle 160 years ago. Earlier today, we were both Katie and I were out on an interpretive program, and we were following in the footsteps of the, thank you, Katie, following in the footsteps of the 8th Florida, and they made, we had a great group of living historians, along with our ranger program, and as part of that, they up towards kind of from the low ground around the Spangler farm up towards the Emmetsburg Road, and I was along for the ride. I was on their left flank taking pictures, and admittedly I got about 2/3 of the way up and I had to stop. My body said, "What are you doing? What in the world are you doing?" So yeah, that humidity's no joke. All right, we're going to take a left here at the 9th Pennsylvania Reserves, and we'll come to the 20th Maine in a little bit. But here at the 9th Pennsylvania is again the formalization of social trails. This one is going to take us up. We're going to follow this one, take it up past the 9th Pennsylvania, up along some of these breastworks that largely would have been built by Union troops in the evening of July 2nd. These would not have been here, obviously, during the time of the battle. As many of you know, many of the Union regiments arrived just with minutes to spare during the battle, so there was no time whatsoever to build any of these breastworks but they would have had time in the evening of July 2nd and into July 3rd. So that's the recreation of these breastworks that's, as you can see, ongoing. Get through these branches safely. Okay. And so we're coming up the hill here to the 83rd Pennsylvania, and again, taking a look specifically at the formalization of these social trails. Now, we've seen water bars that were largely just boulders. Well, here's an example of one of the granite curbs that used to be along the edge of the parking areas. So these have been recycled and found a new purpose here during this rehabilitation project. There's still work to be done around the base of the 83rd, so that hasn't quite happened yet, but you can see that the erosion of the base of that monument has been pretty severe over time, and that is something that's going to be addressed. We'll keep going. Here's another social trail that had been horribly eroded. A lot of water runoff from Sykes Avenue had come down through here and had caused a lot of ruts. This is also going to be one of the major sections of revegetation. So this is going to be closed off. But we're going to keep heading up. And this aggregate that we're walking on now, this section, has not yet been treated. But again, there's literally no runoff here in this area, maybe just a little bit. But here's a transition between stuff, the aggregate that hasn't been treated yet on the bottom, with aggregate that has been treated here that we're passing on to now. It's very solid, and hopefully will last many years. But again, we do anticipate needing to reapply the stabilizing material from time to time, but we think that's a better option in the long term than having to deal with continued erosion of the hill. Okay, now we're here at a four-way intersection. We came down this trail from the 44th New York, and we went out to the west slope towards the 16th Michigan out this direction, and we just came up this trail from the 83rd Pennsylvania, just out of view around the corner. So we've got one intersection going down, one intersection going west, one intersection going up, and one intersection that has yet to be built out. Remember, the contractor's working from the inside out, or from the top down in some cases. So this is going to be a future trail. You can see here between those two big boulders and straight ahead is the extension of Chamberlain Avenue. So when Chamberlain Avenue comes out at Sykes, right there, visitors will be able to cross at a crosswalk right there at that location and come directly towards the camera, at which point they will then have the option of going uphill to the 44th, going west out to the 16th Michigan, or going downhill down to the 83rd Pennsylvania. So we've created a little bit of a path system here, and hopefully this will become well used and really easy to see, really easy to formulate. Now we're going to finish at the 20th Main, but for right now let's go back up to the summit we'll go past and around the 44th New York and up the hill towards Hazlitt's Battery, and then around to the Warren statue and some of the monuments around on the north slope of Little Round Top. Okay, we've been through this area once before. I would have just come up over a couple steps. And right here, at this little bump out, is going to be another interpretive panel talking about the inscriptions that are up on the boulders here just to the north of the 44th New York. So we already have a formal location set aside for a new interpretive panel right here. Now again, all of this that you see with the exposed aggregate concrete is all accessible for anyone who has mobility issues. But let's go around, let's take a walk around the south side. Get that view of the 16th Michigan from above. And from here you get a sense of the rebuilt breastworks that, again, would have been built by Union forces on the evening of July 2nd and into July 3rd. But for many, many years, these breastworks were nothing more than a pile, a rounded pile. Through time, those breastworks had literally just fallen down. Gravity had done its worst. The weather changes had done their worst. And probably a few visitors may have walked over them as well. So those have all been rebuilt here on the upper slope on the west side of Little Round Top. But I wanted to specifically bring everyone over to this junction here, just off the west side of the 44th New York, because we get to a point where the area of the exposed aggregate concrete and the opportunity for folks with mobility issues stops. So there were some difficult decisions that we had to make as we went around the area of Little Round Top and how we would address certain areas. Could wheelchairs get through certain areas? Could wheelchairs make it up and over a certain slope? And if the answer was no, those areas became this stabilized aggregate rather than the exposed aggregate concrete. So again, where you see the concrete, this is all very smooth, very level, and easily accessible for those with mobility issues. And anytime you see this brown, kind of dirt-colored aggregate, stabilized aggregate, that area either has a slope that's too severe or a pinch point that a wheelchair could not get through. Everyone remembers Patty. His nose is doing just fine, for those who were wondering. But as we come around here, we see another one of these gathering areas. And Again, this was the site formerly of an area that had been completely beaten down, terribly eroded, and instead of fighting against how the visitors use this space and how the licensed battlefield guides and anybody else who really brings a large group up here, they need these. They need these spaces. And so those are created in multiple locations across the hill. Now we've seen 2 of them so far, and we're going to see some more. Again, mobility. Folks who need some help with mobility issues have a roundabout way to get back towards the parking lot. We'll look at that in a little bit. But again, here we are seeing this merge, this end of the exposed aggregate concrete, which is basically the end of an area where mobility can be maintained. And we hit a path that is, quite frankly, steep. And as we make our way up here, again, you see those water bars. This area is finished. And again, no erosion off the edges. So this is definitely an area of success so far. And I think when we get up here to the top, I'm going to put the camera down and grab some water. And see if we have any other questions. Let me find a suitable location to put the camera down and get some water and be right back with everybody. Here we go. So Katie, do we have any other questions while I'm grabbing some water?
Monument cleaning.
Monument cleaning, yeah. Give me 1 second. Yeah, absolutely. A monument cleaning is going to be taking place as the contractors move out of a given area. You may have noticed some scaffolding. I'm sorry I didn't mention it. But some scaffolding along, what would it be, the east side of the 44th New York. There's a plaque, there's a bronze plaque up there, and that scaffolding is there to support our staff, our monument preservation staff, to get up there and clean that particular bronze plaque. But yes, as a whole, every monument is going to get a cleaning. Bronze work will be taken care of. All of the specific details and care that we give all the monuments on a rotating basis all across the battlefield, that same care will be given to all of the monuments here at Little Round Top. Our staff will be able to move into those areas once the contractor and our monument preservation staff come to a good schedule. And so yes, in short, all of that's going to be taken care of. So all that stuff is going to be cleaned. Good? Okay. All right, I feel better. Got some water. All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about some of the islands that are still up here, work that still needs to be done. This particular section of trail that leads down towards the parking area, this is again one of the contractor's paths in and out to get to the summit. So this is likely one of the last sections that will get done. So they don't want to create brand new stuff, beautiful, perfect, and then run their equipment back over it and crack everything back up again. So this is work that still needs to happen, but it's largely because the contractor still needs to get in and out of here with their equipment. Now, one of the big things that occurred over the past couple weeks was the completion of the area around, the immediate area around Hazlitt's battery. So once all of the stabilized aggregate was placed, the cannons could be returned. You see that in this particular case, this wheel had a couple scuffs on it on the way from the cannon shop back up here to the rightful place here at the summit. So some spot Priming is happening, and then our folks will come back up and paint that back over again. So that, I think, was the only one that got a couple scuffs on the wheels. I think all the other three were good to go. So this was pretty momentous, a pretty momentous moment when we could actually bring cannons back, the 4 cannons of Hazlitt's battery back to the summit. But this is also one of the areas that we realized was a section that wasn't ready for prime time. And this was one of the sections that we had hoped to be able to maintain some accessibility, but Little Round Top decided against our best wishes. So this trail, the accessible trail that was planned, was meant to go around the outside of this, and we'll come back to this boulder in just a minute, but on the outside, or the downhill area in between that boulder and the 91st Pennsylvania. So around the boulder and up the hill towards Hazlitt's battery. Unfortunately, we could not make the slope, the proper slope numbers work. So that particular idea had to be ditched. And all of this, instead of being the exposed aggregate concrete, the accessibility material, we did have to pivot and make that into a full area down from Hazlitt's battery down to the Warren statue. All of this turned into the secondary material, which is the stabilized aggregate. The aggregate is laid. None of this has been stabilized just yet, so this is soft. But again, to the left and to the right of the aggregate, you can see where the topsoil has been brought in at the same time. It's going to be a small gathering area here. I think we're going to cut the edges down a little bit so that there's no point right here. It's going to be more of a smooth line from the curve over towards this path, and I think we're going to do something similar going back up towards this boulder. Now this boulder is a very interesting piece of Little Round Top. For those who are familiar with what Little Round Top used to look like in this area before this project got started, there used to be a viewing platform right here, right here in the center of the camera. And that boulder was completely covered. The walking surface, the asphalt of this platform went out just above that boulder, and it came out. There was a retaining wall that went around and curved around towards the 91st Pennsylvania, and all that was taken out. But that boulder had been lost to time. So this boulder hasn't really seen the light of day since somewhere, we believe, in the 1950s. So it's fun to be able to come back to a place like Little Round Top that so many people remember from one visit, that one major memorable visit 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Or they've been coming here every year for the past 40 years. And visitors get tied to those memories. And very few people understand that in many cases, this place has been changed so many times that it's difficult to put your thumb on just exactly what was here when the soldiers were here in 1863 and what has been changed. Not once, maybe not twice, who knows how many times. And this is a really good example of that. We had to go back through some old William Tipton photographs, some old postcards that were taken from the general direction of the Warren statue, okay? taken from down there and looking back up the hill towards this boulder. And sure enough, it stuck out like a sore thumb. And then it was covered for decades and decades. So we're pretty thrilled to be able to find something like this that has been hidden for so long by a project that, you know, at its time was maybe the right thing to do. That viewing platform maybe was held as a very important thing to provide for the visiting public. Now, maybe not so much. And in that process, they completely covered a truly historic item of the history of Little Round Top, of the history of the hill, the geography of the hill. So it's, again, it's one of those things where we didn't really realize what we were missing until we found it again. So again, this is one of those little things, little trinkets, if you will, little fun side stories that we're able to tell during this rehabilitation project. All right, let's go over here. This is looking down towards the parking area. You can see a couple of our vehicles down there in the parking area. This path has topsoil on it. This path is going away. So we've got one path coming up from the opposite side, the south side of Hazlitt's Battery, and the other path that we're going to have is the one that comes out off of the General Warren statue. Again, all of this is nice and flat. Really great gathering space for visitors, large groups, no matter who you are. But again, this is not meant to be a space that is going to be fully accessible like some of the other locations that have the exposed aggregate concrete. Again, anywhere where you see this the stabilized aggregate product, this is not, unfortunately, an area where we could not maintain the proper dimensions, the proper slopes, the width of the path, different numbers, different figures that we just couldn't meet. So we had to listen to the hill. We had to listen to Little Round Top, and Little Round Top told us, we understand what you want to do, guys, but the geography won out. So as much as we wanted to have some of this area be accessible, we just couldn't make that happen. But we're going to go down towards the northwest corner of the parking area, which everyone should still recognize. That's not really going to change very much in the new configuration. The same amount of car parking is still going to be here. We're not expanding the car parking. We will be able to expand the number of bus parking, but not car parking. And the big addition is the safety, the layers of safety that we're going to be able to have, especially associated with the bus area. Can talk a little bit about that here. We can talk a little bit about it as we swing back through this area. But here on the east side of the summit, the parking area, this area here on the left, camera left, or the east side is where all the bus parking is going to be. This area is going to be similar for those who are familiar with the bus parking areas next to and adjacent to the Eternal Light Peace Memorial. 4 buses will be able to pull in as they come up the hill from in the distance, come up the hill and be able to pull into 4 new spaces. This new retaining wall is going to be built, I think, in the coming weeks. So this is a big piece of the puzzle. The retaining wall is going to go out, or the new level of the bus area for them to park, and I believe a 6-foot sidewalk that the buses will be able to unload onto, as opposed to buses that maybe would have parked somewhere else along the left side of the parking area and then their visitors would disembark into traffic. Okay, that's something we wanted to avoid. So in this case, this area of the hill will be expanded out to the east. It will be leveled out to allow space for buses to pull in and then their visitors to disembark onto a wide sidewalk. And then that retaining wall is going to be next to the sidewalk, and that's going to be, I believe, in the neighborhood of 4 feet high with a railing across the top, and that's going to be faced with the same material that the retaining wall around the 44th New York is going to have. So that's the same. So once we made a decision on that material to go around the 44th New York, it's going to be the same here when folks disembark off of buses. They will see that wall, and it'll have the same finish for consistency. So that's the bus area. So 4 buses over here, and really the same amount of car parking where everyone remembers it from before. No real changes there. And Sykes Avenue. We see the path that we just came down. This comes from the General Warren statue, and that comes down here to the parking area. But just on the other side of this UTV is the entrance into this very large gathering area that will serve as the formal welcoming area to this side of the hill. So from here you can get a much better sense of how big this space is, and this was deliberate. We'll get to the trail that goes down to the other monuments here in just a second, the 155th and 146th. And we'll circle back. You can get a sense of where we are off the northwest corner of the parking area. And right through the center here, I'm not exactly sure which direction. I think it's going to line from left to right. But this is going to be the area where the find their way around Little Round Top in a way that makes sense, in a way that provides more historical integrity, as opposed to just running up to the summit. Folks will be able to come down here and realize, oh hey, there's a lot of other stuff to see here on Little Round Top than just making a beeline for the summit. And the hope is that some of the visitation will naturally spread out. So instead of all of the people who arrive here during the busiest of times making a beeline for the summit and kind of disregarding everything off to the south slope, off to the north slope, down along that new trail, the Confederate attack trail down from the 16th Michigan. We're really hoping that this design will take that same number of people and spread them out. Not only spread them out, but give them an opportunity to see and learn more about this place and the stories that are associated with the soldiers who fought here. So with that, let's go down this path. Kind of winds around some of the existing boulders. You can see some of the grass is already starting to pop up through. This is maybe just a week, maybe 2 weeks from being finished, or 2 weeks old. It is finished. But yeah, just a few weeks, and this is what it looks like already. And we're going to pop out at the 155th Pennsylvania, and we're going to come out to some more aggregate. Here again you can see the difference between what's finished and what's not quite finished yet. So we are getting a chance to see lots of these trails in multiple different phases of completion. We're going to take that out here in just a minute. But the aggregate trail comes out and goes up and around and stops just short of the 146th New York, which is still in its safety box. Okay, so this is the idea that we're going to really start to get into here on the north slope of Little Round Top. The opportunity that the visitor will now have to take fully designed trails and go in directions that make sense. See more of the hill and learn more. And in so doing, we think that the crowds that have caused all of these issues over the years will wind up spreading themselves out and now be walking and coalescing in areas that they wanted to go to anyway. They were telling us they wanted to go here. Well, this is the first time that we really have had a chance to take what the visitors have told us by showing where they want to walk from point A to point B, and we're going to follow them. We're going to follow their lead. We get out here towards Sykes Avenue, and there's a V, or there's a Y split here, I should say, a V split. And we're going to go downhill, but I want to point the camera back uphill for just a second and note that these stabilized aggregate trails that lead down from the 155th Pennsylvania and 146 New York. A couple things here. This is the old Sykes Avenue path, by the way. We have utilized the historic original Sykes Avenue path in multiple locations. This is one of them. And you'll notice that the aggregate stops pretty far away from the road. That's because up on the west side of Sykes Avenue, this side here in the center of the camera, we are going to have a new sidewalk. This is going to be of the exposed aggregate concrete, but this is not going to be accessible. So this is the one section of that exposed aggregate concrete sidewalk that won't be accessible. It's the only one, but it is going to connect with the northwest corner of the parking area on the summit, and it's going to then intersect with the aggregate here that leads out to the 155th Pennsylvania on the old line of Sykes Avenue, and it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going down the hill where we're going to link up with the final piece of new trail that is going to provide visitors with a brand new experience. Over here on the right side, you can see the different aggregates that go into this stabilized aggregate mix. This aggregate, I've been telling folks, is kind of roughly the size of maybe blueberries or so. Okay, and then here's the other aggregate that's almost like sand. Okay, kind of a coarse sand. Those two materials are mixed on site, and that's what is laid into the new trail system. Now, we'll take a look kind of back uphill again, and that sidewalk comes down along the this side, the east side, I'm sorry, the west side of Sykes Avenue, and is going to come right through here. And we were walking this just last Thursday, working with the contractor to make sense of this space. And the new stabilized aggregate trail is going to come down through here. You can maybe see this orange line. That's kind of a rough idea of where it's going to be. It kind of disappears. But it's going to come out just shy of this monument, and then it's going to turn downhill and go in two different directions. One out towards Gibbs's Battery, we'll go out there in just a second, and the other direction is, again, we're going to follow this social trail that was largely eroded. This one wasn't too bad, but it was eroded nonetheless to get folks down to more monuments. And again, using as much of the geography, topography of Little Round Top as possible. Take folks out towards Gibbs's Battery, and it'll stop before folks get right to Gibbs's Battery, right there at that big boulder. And then the other trail coming from Gibbs's Battery is going to go up the hill right there on the other side of that tree. Try not to trip. Okay, and there's that. So once visitors get down here, they'll have the option of going in one direction or another, but still be able to get to see and read as many of the monuments as possible. Again, these were areas that were not formally did not formally have any trails to them whatsoever. So all of these monuments here on the north slope, all of these are now going to be accessible in a similar way as what we saw a few minutes ago with the 155th Pennsylvania and the 146th New York. I will say that there are going to be 3 more bus parking areas, 3 more bus parking spaces on the east side of Sykes Avenue right through here. And on either side of the two different got a helicopter going overhead. Okay. At either end of the 2 bus parking areas, the one at the summit with 4 spaces, the one on the north slope with 3 spaces, there are going to be crosswalks associated with each of those spaces. One here on the north slope, where we just visited, and 2 here on the summit. One at the north end and one on the south end. So again, our drive to create as many layers of additional safety to the most visited location on the battlefield. Again, I think I'm going to stop talking and breathe as we walk up the hill. And when we get to the top, maybe take another water break and see how the questions are coming. Okay, gonna set the camera down, get some water, and see if there are any questions that we need to talk about. Be right back with everybody in just a minute. No questions? Okay, then I'll take a minute to get some water. Revegetation, yes, all the above. It's going to include native grasses, it's going to include some trees, it's going to include some bushes as well. I think it depends on just exactly where it is on the hill and what space it needs to fill in. But the short answer is yes, it'll be natives across the board, grasses, bushes, and trees. Katie, another question. There is going to be a small, it was really difficult to see, so I didn't stop there. There is going to be a small gathering space on the southwest corner of Hazlitt's Battery, closer towards the 44th New York, in that slope. When we came up the hill, we came up that steep stabilized aggregate trail. Right before we got to Hazlitt's Battery, there was a piece of machinery there. It would have been right in there, is where that gathering area is going to be. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to head down towards the 20th Main, and we'll wrap up down there. But before we get there, I want to stop and again take a look at where we are and get folks back on the same page. So we're coming out of Chamberlain Avenue. The 20th Main is down at the end of that trail, ahead of the camera. But when we get up here to the intersection with Sykes Avenue, there's going to be a crosswalk basically right in here. Again, you can see these two large boulders. Here, the center of the camera on the upslope, and the center of the camera here on the downslope. And then straight ahead is where we stopped a little earlier, where the four-way intersection is going to be located. The up will take you straight up to the 44th. Continuing out straight will take you out to the west face of Little Round Top and the 16th Michigan and the Confederate Attack Trail, or going downhill, that'll take you towards the 83rd Pennsylvania. So that's pretty much the last section where you kind of have to use your imagination. Everything else down here towards the 20th Main is by and large done. Again, we come back to the exposed aggregate concrete. This is accessible, so anyone with mobility issues will be able to get down this direction very easily. And I do want to mention, before we go too far, when we get down to the 20th Main, Chamberlain Avenue splits. It goes off to the left. We'll see that here in a second. And the stabilized aggregate trail continues straight towards the 20th Main. Should be able to begin to see that now. What's important, though, is that all of Chamberlain Avenue, this exposed aggregate concrete, leads all the way down towards the small parking area down next to the 20th Main. From that area, Chamberlain Avenue, up and around, and then it curves to here, and then it takes you back out towards Sykes Avenue. One thing I didn't mention, I'll mention it here, is that there is going to be another accessible sidewalk going up the right side of Sykes, or the east side of Sykes. That then is going to link into the exposed aggregate concrete sidewalk, where buses will be able to safely have their visitors disembark. And there will be a crosswalk on the south side of that bus parking area that will then cross over towards the general area of the area between the 44th New York and Hazlitt's Battery. And there's going to be another accessible trail from there up to Hazlitt's Battery. So let's replay that again. From the area in front of Hazlitt's Battery down to the 44th New York, around the 44th, down and it's going to be a switchback. The area that I mentioned where one of the last trails that's going to have construction done to it, there was a piece of machinery right there. There's actually going to be a switchback right there. But in that area, that switchback is going to be accessible. That switchback gets folks from Hazlitt's Battery down to the level of the 44th New York, then comes down to the south side of the parking area, both automobile and bus, crosses a crosswalk to the east side of Sykes, and comes down to meet Chamberlain, where you see there off in the distance. And then again, it curves downhill, around to the left, around to the right, and comes out just below the 20th Main at the small parking area. All of that is brand new, accessible trail. Very little of that existed before. So even though we weren't able to get quite as much square feet of accessible trail, the accessible trail that we were able to make and create is exponentially more than what was here before. So we are pretty proud of that. But here for the last little section, again, Chamberlain Avenue curves off to the left. It meets up with the stabilized aggregate trail to the right. You can see this area has been done for a while because the grass is incredibly green, incredibly lush. You almost need a hairbrush to come through here and brush it in one direction or another to make it look pretty. But it's really soft. It's kind of fun. But again, these breastworks have been restacked. Again, these are not at the time of the battle. These would not have been built until the evening of July 2nd and into July 3rd. But this path is essentially a replacement in kind, meaning that this path replaces what was here that led down from Sykes Avenue, Chamberlain Avenue, and down to ultimately the 20th Main, which is still in its protective box. But as we look down the hill towards the small parking area that I was just talking about, we get a chance to see, again, water bars. These are the granite ones that were the curbing. Again, they're angled at approximately 120 degrees to get the water flowing in a direction that we want it to go, where it can be fully mitigated. And again, through some of the heavy rains that we've had, we're seeing very little, if any, overflow that will push the aggregate or the soil, the topsoil or the grasses off to the edges in any way, shape, or form. So we're really happy with how this material has worked out for us. And again, we're down here at the small parking area here at the base of the 20th Main. Very much a setup location for the construction folks. But everyone should remember the 20th Main sign, Chamberlain Avenue that we spoke of, curves up to the top, and the trail that goes up to the 20th Main. So folks, that's the end of the tour. We really hope that this provided everyone with more information, more details, a look behind the curtain. Everything that I know, you know. There's really there are no secrets here. We're trying to create the best possible visitor experience that we possibly can, but we want to do it safely, and we want to do it in a manner that we won't really have to touch it again for years and years and years. So it's safe, it's accessible, and we leave it better than we found it. So with that, folks, I hope everyone enjoyed this behind the scenes tour. We'll probably try to do this again. This is the second time we've done this on our YouTube channel. We did one last fall, so this is the first one since that one, and we'll be back again. We want everyone to see the same things that we're seeing. We want everyone to come along on this journey, and we want everyone to be right there with us, because we're doing it not necessarily for us, we're doing it for you guys. And we hope that our visitors really appreciate the work that we're doing, because we are looking out for the best interest of the hill, the best interest of the stories, the best interest of the history. So with that, I hope everyone enjoys their battle anniversary, the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. July 1, 2 are in the books. July 3 is tomorrow. For those who are coming out to the battlefield tomorrow, the full list of programs is on our website. Again, same website as where the Little Round Top information can be found. That's www.nps.gov.gov/GETT. All the information to Little Round Top's right there on the home page, and so too are all the programs that are scheduled for tomorrow as part of the final day of the commemoration of the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. Again, folks, thanks for coming out with us, and have a great holiday weekend. Stay safe.